it's fascinating, right? Because we're taught so often in society that the way to fix things is to go to therapy or marriage counselling, sit in a room and talk about the problems that are coming up. Now, the trouble with that, with the men that join our program anyway, the men I speak with, they say that they don't like to do that. They want to be much more solution focused.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Powerful Man Show. I am your host, Doug Holt, with my co-host, Tim, The Powerful Man Matthews. Tim, what's going on, brother?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Although just before this, you're picking on me for my sinuses. And what noise do I make, Doug?
It's hard to do right now. You sniffle a lot, which I was asking you if your sinuses were if you were feeling better. Because we do messages back and forth throughout the week, every day pretty much, and the rest of the team. And I must have counted 8 times when you were trying to clear your nose or whatever else what you were doing when you were driving. There you go. You're trying to do it again.
That's funny.
It's become a habit.
Yeah, it's super. And I reached out to one of my friends, somebody you know as well, and apparently he said what I've got going on is a symptom of leaky gut. So I've got a poo test that he has sent me out that I will be doing over the next few days, a stool sample, and sending it off, and we'll see what comes back.
Oh, that sounds fun. Stool sample tests are always good.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it because I've been training really well lately, and getting some good rest and eating well, and I'm holding a little bit of fat in certain places, and I asked him, does it make it more difficult for you to lose body fat? And he said, well, yeah, in about 85% of cases, if it is that. So maybe that's my excuse, right?
Yeah.
I'll be wounded if it comes back and the test results don't say anything about gut health. And I'm like,
I'm sure they will. I mean, most people have something to do with gut issues, right? It's just
yes.
in our society with modern food and what we're eating and drinking, and it seems like everybody's got it. Leaky gut is, at least last year was a big buzzword. I think you're seeing it leak more. But anyway, well, I'm glad you're getting some tests, man, and I hope it works because listening to you clear your nose every 30 seconds, as fun as that is, I also want you to feel better.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I believe you.
So, Tim, what do we have on topic for today?
How to save your marriage without talking about it.
Whoa. Okay. Big topic. Wow.
Controversial, right?
Yeah. How to save your marriage without talking about that. My guess is that's what every man would want to do when they want to save their marriage, is not have to talk about it, not go to therapy, not have to, call their best friend, their family members, certainly not have to talk about it with their wife, who probably has been dying to talk, for years at this point, if the marriage is failing. Wow, what a big topic. So kick it off for us.
Yeah, and just on that note, I think I was reading an article the other day, and it's funny, right? As guys, we have such a tendency to bury our head in the sand and not realize what's actually going on in front of us. And I think the stat was something like, of the married couples surveyed who were in therapy, of the married couples, about 60% or higher of the men in the couple reported everything being fine.
Sure.
Everything's fine. They're completely happy and content, and there's no problems. But the woman's like, there is, and it makes no surprise that the other stat, Doug, which was super alarming, is that 70% of divorces are initiated by women.
Whew. Yeah, that is huge. 7 out of 10 divorces that right? In the United States, I think, Tim, we have a 50%. UK is about the same, right? A 50% divorce rate. That means you have the same amount of chance of your marriage succeeding as flipping a coin. So you can imagine being at the altar, hey, Tim, do you take Amelia to be your wife? And then you just flip a coin. Yes, no.
Wow.
Those are the odds. And then on top of it, the ones that succeed, right? The 50% that move forward, 7 out of 10 of those successful marriages, or that are moving forward, I should say, actually back up, those marriages that are going to, 7 out of 10 are going to be the women that actually leave. So Amelia should be flipping that coin, not you.
Yeah, quite right. And it's fascinating, right? Because we're taught so often in society that the way to fix things is then to go to therapy or marriage counseling, sit in a room and talk about the problems that are coming up. Now, the trouble with that, with the men that join our program anyway, the men I speak with, they say that they don't like to do that. They're much more solution focused.
Sure.
And for them to go to marriage counseling and sit in a room for an hour or so and relive the past and talk about things, all it does for them is drive a deeper wedge between them and their wife. So then the marriage counselor's like, okay, I was up, see you next week. Both of them walk out like, holy shit. The feeling literally like they hate each other. It's kind of like if you get stuck in the snow, right? And you're in your car, you get stuck in the snow, and if you put your foot on the accelerator and push down, what happens? You dig a deeper hole for yourself, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Whereas if you actually put something beneath your wheels to give you some leverage and get some traction, then you're able to get out of it. And talking about the problems is very much like putting your foot on the accelerator and reliving the past and reliving the past and reliving the past. For our guys anyway, it just doesn't work. I'm sure, marriage counseling and therapy has worked for some people, I'm sure it has. But for our guys, it definitely doesn't. They do not want to talk about it.
Oh, I mean, I can relate on so many levels. So before my wife and I got married, we did premarital counseling on the advice of couples that we knew. And then we did marital counseling. And I got a funny story for you, Tim. So we've done that, and really it was just like you said, it felt like, being in the mud or snow, spinning your tires, because you're in there and you start to open up Pandora's box, right? Mm-hmm. And I know that the thing that you're arguing about at the time isn't the real issue. But that's what you go to, because that's the point of contact right there. And because of that, you really kind of stirs up a lot. And so you walk out just angry. And so one time, Tim, my wife and I walk out of the counselor's office, and there sitting in the waiting room is another couple, a power couple that we knew, who pretended like everything was great in their lives. And we knew them really well. I leased office space to them for my company at the time. And so I saw them every day, and we walk out, we just looked at each other and just started laughing. It didn't work for them, didn't work for us. My wife and I found other ways, which I think we're going to talk about today, to get on that path. Unfortunately for the other couple, that was the flip of the coin, and they did not make it through. And they focused on marital counseling. It just didn't work for them, and now they separated.
Wow. Yeah, I can remember one of the guys who joined the program in particular. I didn't realize this until after the Alpha Reset, when we were doing his interview, and I asked him, what have you tried? And it was actually Rick who said this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he said him and Chelsea went to marriage counseling and left there feeling so frustrated at one another that night she went and stayed in a hotel, and they were like, this is done. If the marriage counseling can't help us, because it's understandable why it's seen as the last resort, and if the last resort isn't going to help, then what do you do, right?
Yep.
But then he joined the program and things changed, but
things more than changed. Their marriage and love life is one that most people would envy at this point. It's remarkable to see how far they've come. It's just absolutely amazing, from totally changing career paths to being together to traveling across the west coast of the U.S. They live in the U.K. It's just actually been phenomenal to see that transformation, which only happened in a couple of days.
Yeah, and it's one of the funniest things that he shared with me was he finds it really funny how they now argue. They're now arguing it's not so much an argument anymore. It's a conversation about, hey, here's how I'm feeling, here's what triggered me, here's what it brought up in me, and here's what I really desire. And then she's the same. So they were able to get to the real root of the issue very quickly. And they're able to stay together instead of trying to hurt one another. someone trying to win, because we both know that men fight to win, and when men argue to win and women argue to connect often. So in linking it back to the topic, then, how to save your marriage without talking about it. There's a line again that I was reading recently, and it rings so true for the try to connection. What we get the guys to go through in the activation method, and they're probably talking about it. Like we said, keeps you in the past, right? And instead of needing to talk about it, just go out there and make connection instead. Start doing things to connect. And, there's obviously different facets to that, right? So I'm going to segue onto you, Doug, because I want to know what you did when you were in this position. I actually don't know. We've never had this conversation, right? So I'm curious to know what you actually did.
There's so many things, and this could be a multi-topic conversation. There's a lot of guys, especially business owners, can relate to this. And so, let me set the scene for what was kind of going on at the same time. I was running 3 companies at the time, right? So 3 businesses. 2 of the 3 were very successful. One, I was trying to get that one up to the same level. And I would come home and just almost felt like a stranger in my house, right? My wife was home a lot earlier than I was, or she might've been out with her friends. I was exhausted when I got home. And then you get home and you're used to ordering people around, right? In a nice way. I'm the boss, I'm the leader, and I get to my house and then there was a conflict, right? We had a disagreement. Her perception of what our marriage would be like and mine they collided, right? And there was a disconnect there. So I would get home and it would almost feel like walking into a stranger's house. And my wife would probably feel the same way. So it felt like a distance. We'd come back together a little bit, then we'd grow apart, back together, grow apart. And it started to become like Groundhog's Day. And I know you, like me, we want the best in our lives. So average or good enough isn't good enough for us. So what I did to get out of that, Tim, my wife always wanted to talk about it. And always wanted to talk about it at the end of the night, right? It wasn't like right away. It wasn't early in the morning with a cup of coffee, or anything like that. It was always sit down on the couch in the night or lying in bed, right? And that's not what I wanted to do in bed, right? Is have this conversation. What's wrong? What's wrong, right? You just want to go, what's wrong is you keep asking me, and I'm going to strangle you if you keep doing it, right? So, fast forward to what I did. It was really 2 choices that came about for me. It was exit the relationship, right? Move on to a new relationship, which would have seemed a lot easier. But we all know that we're going to carry the same baggage from one relationship to the next. Statistically, why people have, they get married again and the same issues happen and there's another divorce, right? Or they just say, I'm going to settle with this, rather than, actually staying together and working it out, because they haven't actually hashed out the issues that they had within themselves. So what I did, Tim, was I actually really focused on me, right? And what I call my side of the street. I don't know where I got that from, but I like it. And I've used it for a long time since. But I started focusing on me. What about Doug? Because I had this whole idea. I've had this since college, when I was going to university, is how can I make my stock rise, right? How can I make who I am as a man rise in value? And if things didn't work out with my wife, then, I'd still be of more value, so to speak, to the marketplace, which would be the dating pool. So I really started focusing on me, focusing inward on what I could do. And for a lot of men, what that comes down to, it sounds weird, is really discovering who you are. Because we have these stories about who we've been based on growing up as kids and what have you. And now we don't have a rite of passage, but who are you as a man right now? And who do you want to become? What do you take stands for? And what are your standards? So I started really working on myself, really deep work on myself. A lot of the things that we do at the Alpha Reset and through the activation method now through the Powerful Man. But I started grabbing resources, hiring coaches, anything that I could to really work and focus on me. And the interesting thing that happened is when I focused on me, what I wanted, what I needed, my marriage started to unfold in a beautiful way. My wife started doing the same. And then now we were focused on our individual selves, which allowed the third entity of the marriage, right? The third thing of what we had to grow so much closer.
I love it. We were talking at the Alpha Reset last week, so obviously I came back from the Alpha Reset a week ago. And on day 3, you know what day 3 is like.
Yep.
We got onto the topic of relationships and marriage and connection, that kind of stuff. And Arthur said something that I found really interesting. And we cover this in the Try to Connection, but he dived a little bit deeper into it. And he was talking about how in a marriage, both of the people usually put themselves last.
Yep.
So they'll put the kids first, then they'll put the marriage first, then the guy will put his business first, and then they might then touch on themselves, the man and the woman. What were you saying?
It's a lot of firsts for somebody to have.
Yeah. Kids first, business second.
There you go.
There you go. You like correcting my grammar, don't you?
I do. I did the same thing, right? And that's exactly what I did.
Yeah. And when we were talking about this, and again, this topic of how to reconnect with your wife, fix your marriage without talking about it, it's something we've been talking about in depth for quite some time now. And again, in that same conversation with Arthur and in previous ones with you and him, there are some interesting points that have come up that I'd love to just touch upon. And one of them, and you touched it briefly there when you said about taking care of your side of the street. One of the ways to reconnect with your wife to save your marriage without talking about it is to be able to go home on an evening and be able to actually listen to your wife without needing to fix or without trying to solve the problem. I was speaking to a business owner a couple of weeks ago who joined the program, and his complaint literally was, Tim, I get home on an evening and my wife comes to me and she complains to me about the bed's not being made and there's dishes that need to be done and the stuff that needs to be done with the kids. And I'm just like, hang on a minute. All day I've been at business making all these decisions really quickly. And I just plow through things and I get home and I'm like, come on, can't you just make the simplest of decisions? But obviously we know there's something different going on there, right? But if you come home and you're going to look at your wife through that lens of, comparing her day, let's say, to your day and almost trying to, one up her day, comparing her problems to your problems or your decision-making to her decision-making, it's going to create disconnect instantly, right?
Hey, sorry to interrupt the show, but I wanted to ask you a question. Do you ever feel like something's just missing? Like there's something more out there and you just can't put your finger on it? I totally get it. Go over right now to thepowerfulman.com/freedom to discover the system that other businessmen just like you are using. We've included 10 case studies, 10 men just like you who have found the solution and have found their way on their path. And we want to share that with you. Go over to thepowerfulman.com/freedom right away. Now let's get back to the show.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And that happens so often, right? Because you think as a man, depending, like my family, we have a traditional marriage in the sense that my wife doesn't have to work, right? Which is great. It's a luxury. It's a choice that we had. She takes care of the kids. Now I have the ability to work from home, which is awesome, right? But even if I go to the office all day that I have at the university, so if I come back, the house might be completely destroyed, right? I have a toddler. He's 2.5. He might have dumped all his toys. Dishes haven't been done. And so it's easy to be in that mindset of comparing, right? Like, wow, you're here all day. What's going on? The kid naps. Why aren't you cleaning up? Why do I have to do the dishes? Why do I go and bust my butt, provide for the family. Then I come home and now I got to cook and clean or whatever. It's easy to get into that mentality as a man. But any guy that's ever actually spent an entire, say, 3 to 4 days watching a toddler would rather be at the office. It's very different. So you got to get yourself out of that mindset. And that's when it comes to, like I said, taking care of your side of the street. And one of the things, yeah, of course, one of the things that you want to think about, if you don't want to talk about your marriage, is how do you step up? And I was talking to a friend of mine who was going through it. He was actually contemplating divorce, and he had something very similar to what Arthur was talking about putting himself, he was putting himself last. And he kind of had that whole idea of like, I'm done with this. I'm done putting myself last, Doug. You know, I come home. He's like, dude, I come home and half the nights I have to cook. It's ridiculous. You know, she cooks half and she wants me to cook the other half. This is BS. And so I asked him point blank. I won't say his name. We'll just call him Brian. I said, because I know he listens to this podcast and his wife does now too, which is great. But I went, Brian, if you get divorced and separated, how many nights are you going to be cooking? He's like,
yeah.
Oh, 7? I'm like, yeah, exactly. So are you in love with your wife? Yes or no? Yes, Doug. Cool. So you're in love with this woman, right? And now you're complaining that you get home from work. She also worked, by the way, Tim. And now that she's asking you to help out with the cooking. Give me a break, man. Like, what's the deal here and where's the settling? And a lot of times what happens in relationships is you go in with different expectations. And oftentimes it's the expectations based on your upbringing. So for example, you and Amelia, right? When you guys first moved in together, something as stupid as taking out the trash can cause a huge fight. And you don't know why.
Which it did.
Yeah. So maybe in your house growing up, Tim, your mom took out the trash all the time. But in Amelia's house, her father took out the trash.
What happened?
Yeah. And so there's a conflict there because it's never been discussed. We just go in with all these assumptions that, hey, I put on the ring, right? And now or in any relationship, if you're not married, but now everything's going to fall into place. But we have this pre-programming, right, that needs to be reset, needs to be redone. And that's why when you look on your side of the street is a very good starting point for the men that we work with of cleaning themselves up, cleaning up their side of the street. And let me talk about what that means. What that means is, imagine a normal street in a suburban community anywhere in the world. And you have one house on one side of the street and you walk out your front door and you look across and there's your neighbor, right? Very close to each other, right across the street. And so what most people do is they walk out their front door, look at their neighbor's house and start pointing it out. Like, there are weeds in their garden. They haven't watered this. There's chipped paint on the roof. They start looking and pointing out all the flaws in their neighbor's home. Meanwhile, they could have trash littered on their lawn. They could have, weeds everywhere, no flowers, no plants. So the point is, clean up your side of the street first before ever looking at your neighbors. And your neighbor in this case is going to be your significant other. So if you're able to really look at yourself and look at what's perfect about you. So you mentioned that, you have some stubborn body fat, right, that you're trying to get rid of. Well, that could be something that you get to focus on, right? You can work on yourself versus pointing out flaws that Amelia would have, or guys, you listening to us, instead of pointing out flaws that your wife has, right? Are you flawless? And the answer is no, right? I know you guys that are listening to this or watching this right now, you're not flawless. So focus on improving yourself with love and compassion, and don't focus on criticizing your partner at this point. And that's going to be the first step, in my opinion, Tim, to be able to save your marriage without having to sit down on the couch and have a long, laborious conversation about your feelings. If you don't want to do that, guys, I know I don't. That's an easy way to get out of it.
Yeah, and if you are flawless, then please write to us and let us know how you've done it, because I would definitely be open to some suggestions.
Actually, don't write to us, because I don't want to talk to any guy who's that narcissistic that thinks he's flawless.
I'm open to it, so you can write to me. Yeah, because the thing with women, right? They're like a flower. Put in the right environment, they'll blossom, and put in the wrong environment, then they'll shrivel up. And the right environment for a woman is to be able to make sure you're appreciating her and praising her. So if you come home on an evening and you're looking at her through that same mentality of either judgment about her problems that she's bringing to the table, judgment about her day. Hey, I've been making deals at whatever level and, you can't even do the dishes. And also it's like a sense of entitlement, right? So often we've found it that men have made their lover their mother. We did a podcast on this, right? Leaving their underwear all over the floor and getting the wife to pick it up, expecting the wife to just go around and pick stuff up after them, whether it's empty plates, whether it's underwear, whatever it is. It's not about being another child. Don't be the third or the fourth or the fifth child. Be the man that she married, that you promised her that you were going to be. And part of that, like you say, take care of your side of the street. And then when you do come home, create the right environment for your wife where she feels heard. So when she's going to speak with you, ask questions, engage. 80% of all communication is non-verbal, right? So if you're there just blank stare, and I've been guilty of this in the past, I'm just thinking about the powerful man at work. And Amelia's talking to me, and she can feel me. She knows I'm there, but I'm not there. So we teach something called a decompression routine, right? You got to have a routine. You have a cool one when you finish in the office or when you work from home. Have a routine that triggers you. So when you walk through the door, you're able to see your wife or your partner through a particular lens. Hold that space so she can offload, because women get full like a glass. When they get full, they need to just empty the glass. You've got to be the container to hold that space for them, and praise and love and appreciation. And you might be tired and you might be exhausted from making all these decisions, but when she asks you, what do you want for dinner, just make a decision. Just make, rather than saying, I'm easy, whatever, it's up to you. She's looking to you for leadership, right? She just wants you to make a decision. Whatever that decision is, just lead. You can't be so focused on leading all day in the office, but then when you come home, you've got nothing left to lead your family. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, that's great points there. There's two things, right, that when I talk about those things with the guys is, if anybody's been involved in martial arts, or if you haven't, you've seen Karate Kid, right? What's the first, what do you do when you're done sparring, what have you? What do you do every time? Is you turn around and you bow to the dojo before you exit. One of the reasons you do that, Tim, and everybody listening, is because you are giving yourself a psychological symbol, right? Basically a trigger that says, I'm leaving the fighting mentality and I'm going out into the real world. And you can do the same thing when you leave the office. We teach the men a variety of tools because everybody's different on what you want to do and how you anchor that in so you can transition to a family man. And I remember one time my wife, Erin, said to me, she's like, yeah, at work, you give it all. I've seen you at work. Everybody loves you. You're glowing. You're radiant. You're having a great time. And you get home and we're left with the shit. We get the leftovers, right? And guys, that hit me hard because who's the most important to me is my family, by far. Mm-hmm. They're by far the most important thing to me. Yet I was giving them the leftovers.
What did you say?
My family's the most important thing to me. Tim, you're a distant thousandth somewhere in there. My family, maybe number two, buddy.
Not for the better.
You're number two. So yeah, what happens often is we come home, we're left over with the shit. We're tired. We've been battling. There's a lot of men, describe work as war and battling, which is ridiculous. When you get to the root of it, that could be another podcast. But, then you get home and you're just exhausted and you're grumpy. And your family gets the crap part of you, not the great parts of you. And that's where things start to spiral out of control, because when you're feeling like crap, you start pointing out everybody else's wrongdoings. And that goes back to everything we've been talking about during this podcast.
Yeah. And we've not even scratched the surface, really, have we?
Not even close.
And we're going through like an inventory in my mind of all the things that feed into how to save your marriage without talking about it, because you don't need to go to therapy. Well, it's kind of a blanket. I don't know the situation of the listener, right? So it's not fair for me to say you don't need to go to therapy. I'm sure therapy works great for some people. All that we know is that for the men that come to us, it's not worked. And talking about it hasn't worked either. So yeah, there are so many places we could take this one show. Definitely not enough time right now to dive into every one of them.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, I think that's so important that, whoever's listening to this, if your marriage is struggling, right? And I've been there personally. I've done the therapy route. And like you said, Tim, didn't work for me. Didn't work. I got some tools and things like that you can go through it. And it sparked, it's like having a mediator more than anything. Yeah. But the real big thing was working on myself and then resetting, right? Which we talk about, at the Alpha Reset. That's what it's designed to do. But that takes years unless you're in a very intense immersion experience that you're able to do it, right? In other words, you're in a focus guided experience with experts who can take you there. And that's how you really make the change. That's how you get the woman back. That's how you reclaim who you are as a man. And it's not easy. I'm not going to lie. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort, significant investment in time and energy, really, to do it. But when you come out the other side is a totally different experience, right? A totally different experience. I mean, I got a second child on the way, and that never would have happened. The first one wouldn't happen, but the second one certainly wouldn't if we weren't able to have reconciled the issues that we had and blossomed a beautiful, beautiful marriage. And that's what everybody wants, right? Nobody wants to get divorced. Everybody plans on staying together. But as we talked about the show, 50% end it. And some for good reason, but most of those could be saved if we're doing some of the things that we're talking about now.
Yeah. And it's like being given a cheat code, isn't it?
It really is.
Once you actually figure out what's going on and realize that you do not need to talk about it, and you can get ahead of the problem so it doesn't become a problem. It's like being given a cheat code. Hang on a minute, if I punch these numbers in this particular order, and maybe sometimes you're going to punch them in a different order, but if I punch these numbers in and do these things, right, it unlocks this. The flower blossoms. Wow. And this is what's been waiting for me all this time.
It's just not talked.
Yeah. It's
no one talks about it. No one talks about it, Tim, and it's just ridiculous. Because no one wants to talk about it. No one wants to admit it, and guys don't tend to ask for help until it's almost too late. So guys, if you're listening to this, you're sitting on the fence, just know that there is a lot of help for you guys out there. And there is a methodology and there is a way to turn things around. And the best part about it is you're doing it for the right reasons, that you're doing it for yourself, you're doing it for your family. This is not you changing who you are or pacifying or pussifying yourself in any way, shape, or form. It's the exact opposite. It's stepping up to be the man that Tim and I know you can be. And you know you can be really deep down inside.
I love it. So on that note, Doug, 3 takeaways, 3 action points for the guys to make that are listening that might be resonating with.
3 action points. First things first is get raw and real with yourself, right? What's really going on here, right? So the way that we talk about it, Tim, at The Powerful Man is, hey, look, if I asked your wife this question about what's wrong with your marriage, what would she say? Be honest with yourself and write it down. Second step is start cleaning up your side of the street. Start working on you. Increase your stock, your worth as a person. What do you like to do for fun, right? There's so many men we talk to that just don't even know, right? Here's a day by yourself. What are you going to do? Well, you probably don't have a lot of friends that you really want to hang out with, things like that. Change what's going on there and change yourself. Third is either get involved in a program or have hyper specific, not tasks, but a pathway and a strategy that's going to allow you to reset and reclaim the man that you know yourself to be. This is your shot, guys. And there's nothing more sexier for a woman than a man who goes after what he wants and knows who he is.
Well said. Well said. Well, guys, you've heard it from the master himself. I didn't say the master of what, did we? But
yeah, you did.
Master, no. You heard it from the master himself. So, guys, if this is resonating, head over to thealphareset.com. Maybe you'll like what you see there. And until next time, guys, we hope that you have a terrific day. And if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch, whether it's via the Facebook group or via email, and we'll see you on the next episode.
See you guys.